Welcome to the C-Suite Sales and Marketing Perspectives podcast. I'm Steve McDonald, your host. Today, we've got a really interesting conversation with Steve Hyde. Now, Steve, you're the CEO and co-founder of Push. And Push is one of the UK's largest performance marketing agencies. But what we're going to be talking about is the evolution beyond performance marketing and AI and what that really means. But as a foundation to that conversation, I think you guys have won almost more awards from Google than any other performance marketing agency in the United Kingdom. You personally have a background with huge brands from Pepsi to Walt Disney. So I think the perspective you're going to bring to us today is fantastic. But before we get into the topic of how to use AI to accentuate your competitive advantage, maybe you could just tell us a little bit more about yourself and Push Group and your point of view before we get started.
Sure, thanks, Steve. So I'm speaking to you from Oxford in England. Greetings to everyone over there and elsewhere in the world. We started Push in 2007, but prior to that, my background was in the corporate world. In marketing and in sales, so I kind of flip-flop between the two of them, and mainly for I have to say, mainly for American companies that you know. So I started out with Mondelez International. It was at the time it was Kraft Foods, believe it or not, in the Middle East. So I was based in London 2 weeks, then flying out to the Middle East, backwards and forwards in marketing. Then I moved to PepsiCo. Well, the business you would know is Frito-Lay. So the Frito-Lay brand in the UK was a brand called Walker's Crisps. And then I moved from there to eventually I ended up at Disney as a director for the UK on their home entertainment side. So three sort of pretty big American companies. Pepsi was definitely my favorite of the bunch. Very, very results focused, meritocratic business. And really enjoyed my time there, and took a lot away from that, which I think I've taken on into building our business Push. So if truth be told, I wasn't sure when I left. I knew I needed to leave the corporate world in around about 2000, 2001, and I knew that basically because a lot of the time when I was in corporate jobs, I'd be getting feedback from whether it was bosses or psychometric profiling that I was probably a little bit too maverick for some of those corporations. So I'd get things like, I'd get my card marked down in performance reviews. I'd get the usual what we call the BS sandwich. So I'd get good marks for it for things like drive for results, analytical thinking, conceptual thinking. They'll get marked down for a thing called executive maturity, which kind of was their way of saying you need to toe the line a bit more and not sort of stray out of break some of the rules too much. So that was quite a regular feature, and I think it's strange, isn't it? When you're in your 20s, you don't always know yourself as well. You have a sense of where you're going, but in that era, Steve, I think. And probably it was the same across the world. When you came out as a graduate in the early 90s, there wasn't an internet business. And so every business graduate, the kind of the holy grail of a business graduate was to go and work for a big brand, like an FMCG brand in marketing or in sales. And that's what I ended up doing. And whilst it may well have pleased my mum and dad to say that their son was, this job at Kraft or Disney or wherever, I wasn't too comfortable there. I kind of I did my stint and then I needed to move on.
So tell me a little bit about all of this background, right? And then for 17 years, you've run an extraordinarily successful performance marketing agency, creating demand gen campaigns for your clients. But now with the advent of AI, there's an entire evolution that you're talking to your clients about. And that's the evolution with AI that we're going to talk about here today. What's your point of view on this evolution? What do we need to know about it? And how do we need to reorient our thinking around it?
I would say, I think the two things that come across to me, and they I come from a sense of, the word that I would use is not I think this is going to happen. So I have a real strong belief. I know this is going to play. I'm old enough now to have been around the block a few times, and I can see the same patterns that I saw in around the sort of 2005, 6, 7 mark, with the emergence of digital. And what I mean by that, we perhaps explore it further, is at the beginning, and you probably remember that the dot-com crash, and probably people around sort of saying, yeah, it's a busted flush, the internet, it's been overhyped. Let's get back to the real world of, selling, whatever sugary cereals and snacks. But actually, then 2005, 6, 7, you get Google really emerging, Meta, or what was then Facebook. And then suddenly you have these big, US and European brands suddenly realizing that digital is a really big thing. And I'm seeing this play out again with people. We had the big, obviously AI has been around in different formats for many, many years, but you had the big aha moment when ChatGPT really came into the forefront in November 22. And what I'm seeing now, Steve, is an element of businesses, in some cases, just holding back, not really going full throttle into exploring how it might work. A lot of people, kind of just sticking their heads in the sand. There's a bit of fear going on. But the two things that I feel and know is that this next phase is going to be bigger and faster than what we saw in terms of impact compared to that early digital wave. So when people say, I've heard people say things like, yeah, AI, it's going to be like as big as social media. It's like, no, it's going to be way bigger than social media or the mobile phone, or what you guys you talk about cell phones. It's going to be way bigger than the impact of that, because it's going to touch every aspect of business and marketing in our lives. And when you look at the capabilities of it, when you start lifting up and looking at what it can do, it's incredible. It's absolutely incredible. And some of the biggest challenges I think that we face collectively is like knowing where to focus. So when I talk about AI in marketing, it's not what do you mean by that? What aspects of marketing, and trying to understand where to focus and where to get the best bang for your buck, really, where it's going to have a real impact.
So when you're you're talking with your clients, and past conversation, I agree with you, because I talk to a lot of CMOs and CROs and CEOs too, and everybody's convinced that AI is going to be a game changer. You don't have to convince anybody of that. But taking the first steps, knowing what to do, being fearful of, if I do it wrong, or I don't know what I'm doing, I have AI imposter syndrome, right?
Yeah.
When you're leading the conversation with your client on, what does this mean? What do you need to be thinking about and doing differently? What are the kinds of things that you're saying to them?
So, I mean, a really good question. That's a really very thought-provoking question. What I would say, some of the things that we're saying to them, Steve, would be, first of all, don't think of this as some big IT project necessarily, in the way, because I think some people have framed it in that way. They thought, wow, look at the impact this could be a multi-million dollar, or hundreds of thousands of dollars investment. So the first thing I'd say is it's probably not that. It's probably a lot more about rolling up your sleeves and experimenting and dabbling and playing. That's the first thing. The second thing I'd say is that there's a concern around, obviously, one of the concerns around privacy. And I think not enough businesses yet understand that there is a way of handling and managing that privacy conversation such that businesses aren't exposed. Um, Thirdly, I would say there's this fear factor around, I think there are some people that are genuinely, they're worried about either losing their jobs or they're worried about appearing ignorant. And I think this is particularly, from experience in corporations where people don't like to be overly exposed. They're often, they're not able to show their vulnerability. People aren't easily going to say, you know what, absolutely no. I know a little bit about AI, but I don't know that much, and I'm really not sure I know where to start here. People are reluctant to do that in boardroom meetings and in conferences, but that needs to happen. And the fear factor is a concern, and we need to all move beyond it and start, because the phrase that I've talked about with you before is people are saying, about AI losing jobs, because it's inevitably going to have an impact on all sectors and jobs. The phrase I'd use is, as a marketeer, you're not going to lose your job to AI, but you will lose it to a marketeer that is using AI. That's a kind of key soundbite or takeaway that I'd always want to get across to people. Like, if you don't start putting this first, if you don't start really thinking, you know what, we need a roadmap here, we need to start testing, we need to stop procrastinating, and we need to start taking responsibility and stop thinking that it's the responsibility of it. Is it the responsibility of IT, or is it where it says, just say, you know what, guys, we're gonna take this on. We're going to start bringing it across and looking at it's looking at actually implementing it across all aspects of marketing, from research to planning, control, budgeting, every aspect, and just look at it and start working with it.
And it's interesting because Google themselves has really embraced AI in putting out statements like, in 5 years, they expect more than 80 to 85% of all content on the internet to be AI generated.
Yeah.
Right? So here's Google, right? The kind of the arbiter of how we find content online. And so they're therefore, how do our like B2B buyers find content and evaluate us and all kinds of different things. And they're saying, we're embracing it. Right. So how do we embrace it? And I talk to a lot of folks that are, it's like, one of the first things that you can do is encourage your team to use it. There are a lot of team members that are afraid of, if I use, AI and I'm not showing that I'm generating the content alone myself, that I'm going to get in trouble for that. Right. So really, first off, just embrace it and be open to it and encourage experimentation with it. But I know one of the things that, because with, performance marketing that you've done for, years, performance marketing is about, performance marketing around content, right? It's about pushing content out. It's about having people engage with content. And so, what are your thoughts in terms of AI and content development and the level of quality, how it's going to actually impact the performance marketing, the growth, the demand gen campaigns from companies?
So there are different aspects of generating content where I think many of us will experiment, will dabble, and think, you know what, that's not what I want. And so I was playing around last week on some image generation tools, getting very frustrated. So the first thing I would say is that just because some of those things aren't working yet, don't assume that it's going to be literally turn around in a few months' time and it could be way more advanced. So one thing I think all of us need to do is to keep open-minded and keep checking back on the capabilities of AI in all aspects of marketing. So we're using, for example, when we think about content, we might use, we've got some consumer goods companies that we work with where the marketing, the CMO will say, look, guys, we know who we want to target. We've got these 5 personas that we are really focused on, and we want to build campaign strategies around those across all channels. Tell us how we're going to do that. Then we'll get into a conversation. We'll say, well, hold on a second. Let's have a look at that. And this is one of the things I think agencies need to do, is to start to really think about how they challenge. So some things we've done recently, we've gone across and looked at customer reviews or consumer reviews. So where you can scrape all of the reviews, and you can, so thousands and thousands of reviews, and you can even do this obviously with phone calls into customer service centers. You scrape all that data, you are then in a position where with all that data, you can use AI to analyze that and then interpret and take a view on where it actually think that distinct personas are. And so, for example, we had one example where there was a business with 5 very distinct customer groups that they've been talking about these rock solid for years, but then the analysis, which went very quickly, by the way, once we got the green light to say, right, go and do this, the analysis showed that there were at least three other groups, other personas, other funnels that had been completely ignored, where there was a clear user need, there was a clear demonstrable approach to targeting these groups. And when we told the client that this was the case, they got it, and they were sat there in disbelief, but then sat there realizing that, wow, this is so powerful. This has told us something that's really, really useful. It's done it very, very quickly, and it feels like it's bang on the money. It's really showing us something that we hadn't covered. So I think, and that then shapes the content strategy, because then you have a whole new approach to how you might need these targets. So that then generates loads more work. So yeah, it's very, very, and that's just one example of many.
What I love about that is, it's a clear demonstration of AI is no good when you just don't give it any input and you say, create me this, right?
Yeah.
Anybody can do that from anywhere in any laptop. But when you take large amounts of really relevant data, right, and have AI analyze it, then you've got tremendous insights. You mentioned contact centers. We work with a contact center, and absolutely the customer learning that comes out of that, no human could go through thousands and thousands of interactions and look for it. You just can't do it, right? So
No.
the potential here is so enormous. What I wanted to do is I wanted to talk about, how do we have this discussion, at the C-suite level, and why aren't more CMOs having this kind of a conversation with their CEOs to a point where AI can actually provide a large competitive advantage for our companies? Why do you think that's happening?
I mean, the thing is, there's at least 2 reasons, possibly 3. So the first one is that I think some CMOs are genuinely fearful that AI will undermine their positions. I think there's the second one would be that they did not particularly, because they're not sure quite where to progress. Their relative ignorance of what can be done is holding them back, and combined with the fact that there are examples where you can look at businesses and you can quite quickly see that if you play out a discovery project around what a business could be doing, you can see where they can cut media spend and get the same results. You can see where they could potentially cut some staff as well. And so if I'm a CMO, I may not be rushing to do that. I mean, I think I would, because I was always the disruptive maverick killer type. But some others that are a little bit more guarded and a little more conservative in their approach probably going to be concerned about that. So this is one of the things we found is we've genuinely found that we've sat, we've presented, we've pitched to some big clients, some really big fashion clients here in the UK that sell in the US too. And we've had feedback from some of them that we talked actually too much about. And then we sat there scratching our heads thinking, we don't understand what's happening here. Why can't they see? We've shown them some very, very clear opportunities for some stellar growth. The presentation was super clear. We virtually guaranteed the growth, and yet they've gone with the same old. They've gone back and sat with a more traditional agency, and then it's dawned on us after a bunch of these that actually we're talking to the wrong people, and we need to talk to actually at least CEO level, because it's a strategic decision that needs to be taking place in the boardroom. And the CMO is not always ready for that. I have an example of something similar in the previous era. So if you can remember back to the 90s, and you can remember how marketing was then, most marketing directors or VPs of marketing, they cut their teeth, they earn their credentials in a world where TV, radio, and press dominated. So as digital started to emerge in around the mid 2000s, there are examples of very smart VPs of marketing who suddenly felt very threatened by the emergence of digital. And in a couple of cases I know where suddenly what happened is a digital director or a head of digital was brought in, and there was often a lot of friction there. And I think that's potentially going to play out again, because no one likes being exposed for any kind of level of ignorance. So we're trying to get the conversation at CEO level, or even try to talk to CFOs, because we're trying to go from a campaign point of view. We're talking to CFOs to say, look, your CMO might not be talking about this because there's a real opportunity here to actually save costs. And if that's what is going to be of interest to you, then please please do ask for more information.
So it's interesting, this fear factor, right, of just the unknown.
Yeah.
And is it the kind of thing where you think we just need to see some good case examples, some case studies because you think CMOs would be at the higher end of we need to innovate, we need to try new things, we can't rely on the old, we're gonna fall behind, we're gonna lose our competitive advantage, right? Being a B2B CMO, the CMOs that I talk to every day, that's part of the game, right? It's part of the game is that we've got to stay ahead. And that's part of our seat at the table.
Well, I think it's what's interesting for us is that we work in lots of different sectors and spaces. At one stage we thought we would try and focus on particular verticals to say, like, we'll double down on this particular vertical. It might be B2B, SaaS products or something like that. And we'll really focus our messaging on those sectors. But what we found is it's not actually about the sector or the vertical. It's about the personality type. We need to get the proverbial ball rolling on this. What we need to do is we need to find the innovators. We need to find the risk takers in the CMOs. We need to find the people that are slightly, much more likely to take. So not all CMOs are like that. I mean, there are CMOs that are just, they may be less likely to try new things out. They're not all. Some of them are quite happy just managing, modest growth each year, because they genuinely concerned that if they try something and it fails, that's going to be on their CV, on their resume. So So yeah, we definitely we're finding that we need to try and focus on a different group of people or a different type, personality type.
It makes good sense. In fact, CMOs do have a little fear of failure because we've got the shortest tenure in the C-suite. The
Yeah.
point that direction quite often. You
Yeah.
know, if you think back over your career and then where you're at now, the market's at now, the opportunities, what are you most proud of that you've been able to accomplish?
I think getting the business up and running through what was then, we started in 2007 and we all know what happened in 2008. So I started a family in 2008 as well. So getting the business through that period out the other side into 2000 was a big achievement for sure, because we could have thrown in the towel and given up. That's one. I think another one, and this will sound so we won an award with Google, and it was that for the Europe, Middle East, and Africa. It was the best campaign on for a best most innovative campaign on a mobile device. And because we run it, we were up for an award at the global awards, which were held in New York. And typically, typical Brits, we've got no chance of winning this because we're going to be up against firms from South Korea and Southeast Asia. And these guys are all over mobile. They live with, mobiles, all the time. There's no way we're going to win it. So Ricky and I, so the co-founder, we sat right at the back of the audience. There's about 1,000 people somewhere. I think it was South Street Seaport in New York in some big hall. And we sat right at the back of the audience. Almost we were like kids kicking ourselves, thinking, well, we're not point. So, and then they announced the awards and went through it, and we won the award for the global award so that was the biggest award we ever won. And slightly embarrassing because we had to walk down to collect the award. We were so far at the back that by the time we got to the front, they had to play the music again. So it was pretty embarrassing. But that was a proud moment. And I think that's the second. I think the third one, I think actually steering the business through this COVID period, in this period of, the period of uncertainty, and actually developing what is a new business model around AI and marketing. I think that's going to be a big achievement because it's almost like we're having to build a business again. It's to some extent, we've got the cash cow business, which is, agency, performance marketing, running people's campaigns, spending other people's money across the world on different campaigns. That's an established business. It's not a big growth sector for all business, but it's an established business. But we're going with AI and marketing, where we're developing a whole new business model, which is much more it's more consultative. There's more training involved. The breadth of the scope of AI is, obviously with what we've done in performance marketing, is largely around managing. We do SEO and we do some other stuff, some CRO, but it's largely about managing campaigns on those main channels. Whereas with where we're going at the moment with AI, it can be, like you talked about earlier, it can be analyzing call center data and looking at. It could be looking at how we come up with new personas. It could be looking at, how we generate better quality content. So it's a far broader area at the moment. So I hope that will be the next big achievement.
So we've talked about a lot. If there were one thing that you wanted people to take away from this conversation today, what would that be?
I'd say build up yourself out a roadmap for how you're going to implement AI or approach AI in your marketing organization. There are a variety of those out there at the moment, but try and get some sense, some measure where you can look at yourself and think, okay, where are we now? and where could we be? And then I think what you need to do is regularly review it at board level, not just in your marketing department, but at board level, just to really, really hunker down and look at that. But the roadmap needs to be built. So I suppose the precursor to that is, for everyone, is bring the conversation to the highest possible level you can within an organization. This is not just about going out and, like I said, see the CMO level and saying, go and find me another creative agency, go and find me another, media agency, or a CRM provider. It needs to, that's something you can delegate to a CMO and be totally happy that they're going to make a good decision on. But this needs to go up to a higher level, because and I don't like the phrase game changing, but it is changing the rules about how the game is going to be played. And I think it's going to happen very fast.
All the examples that we've talked about play back into one thing for me. And it was Accentuated. I had a CMO on last week, and he said, the more that we can understand our customer, our ICP, the bigger competitive advantage that we have. The examples of looking at customer interactions in the call center is about understanding your ICP. Expanding the definitions of the personas within your ICP is a deeper understanding. Content and the ability to create content that, once you understand your ICP, that directly speaks to them. All of this basically points to the direction of, how do we serve our customers better? And AI can do a tremendous job on that. And we've just kind of scratched the surface on how we can do that here. But I think that's why, when you're talking about it has to be raised to the level of the highest level in the organization, that's why, there's not an organization out there where the customer isn't the highest authority. And if AI can help us understand them and serve them and create experiences for them that we never could before, that's our competitive advantage. That's my takeaway from what we've been talking about here today.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more.
Well, Steve, I know there's going to be people that have additional questions, and is it appropriate that we would give out maybe a link to your LinkedIn profile where they could reach out?
Yeah, cool. You can do that. Put my LinkedIn profile up, and welcome any questions if anyone has them.
Fantastic. Well, thanks for coming on today. Thank you for sharing all of your insights and giving us more and more to think about as we continue down this journey with AI and what it could mean.
It's a real pleasure. Thanks, Steve.